everybody, and welcome to the very first inaugural premiere Queer Opera Conversations. My name is Chuck Dillard. I am the founder and artistic director of Queer Opera, and I am thrilled to have my very first guest for these conversations to be my friend, Daniel Mobbs. Daniel, welcome to today's conversation.
Thank you, Chuck. It's so nice to see you, even remotely, finally.
It's good to see you too.
To talk about your fabulous group and what it's like to be a part of the queer musical community.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Before we get into some questions, I want to make sure that our audience knows about you in case they've been under a rock for the last few years and don't know about the amazing Daniel Mobbs, bass baritone. Daniel is from Louisville, Kentucky. I imagine you grew up with a lot of sweet tea and good biscuits and whatnot. I appreciate that myself.
Crisco.
Do what?
Crisco.
Crisco, absolutely. Yeah, and margarine. And
yeah.
Graduate of AVA in Philadelphia and made his Met debut in the 2003-2004 season. In addition to performing at the Met, he has worked all over this country. Santa Fe, Pittsburgh, Boston, Baltimore, New York City Opera, Virginia, Boston Lyric. The list goes on and on. And in addition to being an amazing performer.
Portland Opera.
Oh, well, I'm getting there. Portland Opera's at the end of your list because that's sort of where we are right now. Daniel and I are in Portland, and he is working as the teaching artist in residence for Portland Opera's artistic department and is the advisor for the Portland Opera resident artists. And this is a new position, right, Daniel?
Yes.
Made especially for you. In addition to teaching there, he's taught at San Francisco Conservatory and is currently teaching at University of Portland and Portland State, where I also teach and where we met. So that's just a little bit about Daniel. Anything I missed from your formative years that you would like to include?
Oh, I went to a performing arts high school, so we'll get into that story later. But yeah, it's where I first met queer people was by going to a performing arts high school, and that opened up my eyes to this world.
Well, that's a great segue to our questions. And I'll sort of jump around with the questions. What was the first representation of queerness that you remember seeing in music or in the arts?
It would have, literally my first day of school at the Youth Performing Arts High School in Louisville, Kentucky. I immediately saw a whole bunch of kids that looked like me, acted like me, talked like me. I didn't even know what gay was quite yet. I hadn't come out officially, and I was really clueless. I just knew that I wasn't the same as the other kids. And then the first day of school, I went, oh, there are people just like me. And there they are. He's my friend, and she's my friend. And they were all musicians, or they were dancers, or they were actors. You had to declare a major in my high school. And I dabbled in acting first, dancing, and then found voice by accident, luckily, and that was the one that I was actually decent enough at to make a living.
That is amazing. I'm amazed at that Louisville, Kentucky would have the I don't know what the word is, the foresight to have a school like this that would really be able to promote the arts and promote freedom of expression. And how cool for you to grow up in that kind of environment.
And imagine that I graduated in 1985, so I was in high school there from 81 to 85, which one doesn't really equate with openness and acceptance to the gay community or the LGBT community. Back then we didn't use those letters, right? We didn't know there was a bunch of us. But in this school, and excuse me, on topic, off topic, I lost my mentor this week to a heart attack, my choir director. Oh. His name was David Brown, and he discovered that I could sing by accident. I was actually in the hallway making a lot of noise with friends and joking and laughing outside of the choir room. They were all going to go to choir, and I was going to a different class, and I laughed a big old laugh, and he came up and said, who just made that noise? Who laughed like that? And I thought I was in trouble. And he invited me to join his choir and taught me voice lessons, and our relationship carried on for forever. And because I was gay, because I was kind of scared and not accepted in grade school, I went to a performing arts high school to be safe. And these people found a talent in me. And I always say, what am I most grateful for? It's not music, but it's the fact that I was gay, that I found music. And so meeting Mr. Brown and him accepting this young, goofy 15-year-old, 140-pound kid, gay as a goose, and said, that's fine, come on in here and be with us. We all have all kinds of different people in this choir. And I just felt safe and productive, and I grew into becoming a musician because of that place and him.
That's an amazing story. So you started out as a choir kid, which,
Oh, big time.
yeah, that's how most, I guess, young singers really get into the vocal arts. So, and I also have your voice in mind, and am thinking how Daniel Mobbs would sound in a bass section of a choir. So how did you get from that Kentucky Performing Arts High School into the opera field? Who inspired you to get out of choir to be a soloist and so on?
It was a bumpy, repetitive journey for the first few years until I found the right place at the right time for my maturity level. And I think the first few years after high school, I wasn't ready for the reality. I'd come from this cocoon of, it was like Fame or any, that's what always people ask, was it like Fame? And you can imagine it was like Fame, but it was really a cocoon of safety. And then to go off into the real world where that didn't exist and you're on your own, it took me a couple of years to grow up enough to get my ducks in a row and go to school. And I ended up at the Academy of Vocal Arts in Philadelphia. Took me a minute to get my bearings and go to school right there too. I didn't do well the first year, but I finished that well. So sometimes we don't educate, we don't follow the same path as everybody else. Obviously, right. All of our paths are a little different. So I lucked into my career. I based it on being trained really well from the very get-go. Luckily, I had some talent to train and being at the right place at the right time, because my professional career started when I was 25. I made my City Opera debut when I was 25, if you can imagine.
That's amazing.
And 2 years later, I was covering at the Met at 27. It seems ridiculous now, but the business was smaller then and there were less of us. And I trained early, so that's how it happened.
Is there anything that you can think of that you can attribute a lot of your drive or success to maybe a personal belief or mantra or practice, something that you do that really focuses you, you might attribute some of your success to?
Being a poor kid from a divorced family, single parent working 60 hours a week, I was a latchkey kid, and I think I learned how to be on my own then. And so that was easy when I did get out in the real world as a singer, when you live on your own in hotels and planes and temporary housing and all that stuff. So that was good preparation. I strayed off the topic. What was the focus of that one? Sorry.
No, like
something.
I mean, you learned independence at an early age. Like, yes. Yeah.
So that is a career thing that helped as well. So while at AVA, every year at the end of the year, we were given kind of not grades, but an evaluation meeting with the artistic director and the general director of the school, kind of like an opera company. Talk about what you did well, what you need to work on for next year, what they see you doing. And I don't want to say they weren't fans, but I wasn't in the top tier of favorites at that school, maybe rightly so. But every year when I would get that meh kind of evaluation at the end of the year, I would go, oh no, you're wrong. I am going to have a career. And it was at the end of my 4 years, literally, they said, well, you do well all the time, and we just don't get you. You don't take a lot of risk. You're very safe. And that was a good push button for me. In fact, I don't think it was nice to say, but it kicked my butt and made me go, oh, no, I'll show you risk. I'll take risk. And I started to take that advice. So it was good advice, maybe delivered a little harshly, but it pushed me to say, there are so many of us out there, and if I just play safe while out in the real world, playing safe just doesn't move you forward. So I had to start taking risks.
All right, great. So jumping back into some queer topics, the first time that I think we actually really worked together was when you very graciously agreed to sing in my queer opera kickoff concert. Which I was amazed that you agreed to do that, because we didn't really know each other so well at that time, but you were so generous and so excited to be a part of it. And your performance of Mon Cœur s'ouvre à ta voix from Samson and Delilah
It
is,
really
I'm
happened.
not joking, do what?
It really happened.
It really happened. And it is, and I'm not kidding, the performance that people still remember from that whole night. All of those, all of those performances, people still ask me, who was that guy with the really long, beautiful hair that sang Dalila Zaria? Yeah, so if there was a role, a whole role that maybe existed that you could play that maybe wasn't written for bass baritone, what would it be?
Super, super great question, because now that I get to teach, and now that I get to not only teach undergraduates and graduate students, which is a lot of fun, but the repertoire is limited, but now I'm getting to work with these wonderful resident artists at Portland Opera who are past all of that primary education. They're actually real singers, real working singers out there doing things. They have skills that they've mastered, and I get to help them go further. So when working with them, I get to dive into all these different roles. Recently, a singer in town, Katrina Galka, came and worked on Zerbinetta with me. And ever since singing Harlequin way back at AVA, I was fascinated by the music of that show and I was fascinated by that role. Of course, I could never sing that role. No sopranos can't even sing that role. It's so hard and so high. And when she said, "Would you mind working on this with me?" I was like, "All right." And while I didn't get to sing it, I get to dive into the text and the character and her energies and all those things, and help find those things through another singer. So yeah, Zerbinetta would be one if we could rewrite it like 3, 4, or 5 octaves. But when I was also in Ariadne as a kid, my voice was super, super high. And a couple of days, the composer didn't show up to a rehearsal or was late, and I would sing through some of the composer. And except for a really spread D flat, I could sing that aria back in the day.
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking that Zerbinetta composer duet would be pretty amazing with you as composer.
Ooh, yeah, still, I think we'd have to take it down at least a half step.
Well, it's just music. We can do that.
Yeah, I'm sure you'd want to do that on Strauss.
That's what finale is for. We can just plug it in.
Yeah.
So I mean, segueing into another sort of similar question. Queer opera, as you know, is not ashamed to just sort of flip the script and cast whoever in whatever role just to make it work so that the singers have a really great experience. Do you think, and I know this is a loaded question since I'm the one doing all of that and asking this question, how do you feel about the future of opera really embracing these new forms of casting trans singers, casting cisgendered singers in roles they're not meant to play? Is it blasphemous? Are we destroying the art form, or are we moving it forward?
I mean, I think those things are the same thing. You have to destroy something a little bit to move forward. You have to say, this tradition is not going to hold up for much longer. Let's see if we can get past this tradition. And, since the state of the obvious, we're in a pandemic and the arts are shut down everywhere, right? Groups of large gatherings may not come back into style for a while, especially even if the guidelines change, just the willingness of the public, the willingness of the performers to be in close quarters. So I think our industry and our art form is going to have to go through a lot of changes. So why not also incorporate, we have a whole lot of different types of people who want to be in our art form. Whole lot of people that have been excluded from our art form. If we're going to break down the boundaries of our art form and have to mold and change to adapt to societal differences, which is the pandemic and maybe a lot of online performing and just different venues, then why can't we just open the doors fully and see what we can do with all these different energies, these different personalities, these different sexualities, these different identities, and see, I mean, it's not a loaded question. I wouldn't support your group so much if I didn't believe in the cause. And that concert you spoke of, I got to see some of those singers in action. I saw a wonderful Figaro scene, a West Side Story scene, and I don't want to label the two singers that were playing the parts that weren't identified because I don't know how they characterize themselves. But they were playing roles that they didn't maybe identify with, but they did identify with, or vice versa.
Right.
It was delightful. It was engaging. It was exciting to see, and to see the energy between the two different performers who are now set up in a different roles, if you will, or different types of roles, was thrilling to witness a new type of energy between those different types of people. And that's all new and exciting, so why not open it up?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there are so many artists out there, especially once we're able to get out of our homes and congregate, that are just going to be so hungry to perform with someone else. Then the last thing we want to do is say, no, you can't do this. We need to be open to all stories, to all possibilities, all permutations, and that's certainly what Queer Opera is about. And we appreciate your supporting that.
Well, and our art form since the inception has always appreciated men singing women's roles, but we don't any longer. But we all accept women singing boys' parts. Why is that acceptable? Well, if we're going to accept that, let's just fully open it up and see who else wants to play what else.
Absolutely. So one of the questions that I sent you, which is kind of a strange question, because I view you sort of as a queer hero, but do you have a queer hero in your art form? Is there somebody that's just out and proud and amazing? I mean, preferably in opera, but anywhere that is really advancing the cause of queerness in the arts these days?
I would like to, I don't know if I could single out one person because I know way too many allies. I know way too many people who are living so proudly and so boldly and so what the hell, deal with it. And I think opera is the place where we all feel safe to do that. And the world is starting to appreciate that we feel cool. Like one of your other questions, I don't want to jump ahead, but what would you say to a young singer? Is be you, just be the most you can be. I think it's okay to just be whatever version of you like, and the world has to accept that. Well, I think there's so many people leading that charge right now, just the kids in your program.
Yeah.
Some of the people I work with, I mean, it's hard to call out. I asked my agent years ago in the 90s when people were coming out in like opera news and talking about, oh, it was so hard for me to come out. And I said to my agent, maybe I should come out. And he was like, oh, sweetie, you've been it for so long. But that's a testament to me living my true self since the beginning. Like, this is who I am. There are a lot of allies that I love, that I appreciate. Joyce DiDonato has always been a big ally to this community. She turned down hosting a huge parade because of the Salvation Army's stance on homosexuals.
Wow.
She's done many things charitable online, and she had an album where she played Devo and Diva, where she played two different sexes in her album. And again, if we accept that from our stars in the female cis category, why can't we accept that from everybody?
Absolutely. You mentioned the singers in queer opera, and I think for me, they're kind of my queer heroes because they are just out and proud and not ashamed to be who they are. And being a man of a certain age that grew up in a certain part of the country, you know, we have the tendency to grow up with certain filters and protections in place. And being around 20-year-old singers here that didn't grow up with that kind of fear is really empowering for me. So I cannot wait to see what the next generation of queer artists produces in the next 10 years. I just hope that there is room for them in the bigger houses.
Well, maybe what they're going to do is create their own performance opportunities, because I think even the bigger houses are going to have to come up with some way to do something else, right?
Absolutely.
We're all in it. So if we're all in this, now we're all like back at the same level, starting from scratch. There's no big groups, little groups. We're all just starting all over, which is super great.
Absolutely. Oh, what have I not asked you? Well, you had touched on the question. We'll go ahead and go there. If you were talking to a singer who is beginning, that you frequently do these days, what advice would you give them as far as getting into this business, queer or not? What's some sage advice you could provide?
Yeah, I always go back to being your authentic self as a person. You know, now that we're not singing, we're not performing, we're not directing, we're not dancing, we're all at home just being and living. I think we're all getting in touch with who are we without that? Am I somebody besides a singer? Well, yes, I'm a human being. That's my art form. That's not me. So remember, as a young person, especially when you're super driven, all you want is that thing you haven't gotten yet, which is your career, which is your opportunity to perform. Remember that that's not you. That's what you want to do with your life. That is not who you are. Because when it's taken away from you, even like my career is waning because of age and choice. I like staying home and teaching and not being on the road in a suitcase, but also the business is filtering out, there's ageism and all that stuff. But now that we're on the same boat with this pandemic, I've spent a lot of time in these 6 weeks thinking about who I am outside of the business. What is my worth in society besides my voice and my teaching? And there has to be worth to all of us as human beings. And I think one of the things that's great about queer opera is it's not all about the voice, and it's not about really the opera. It's about the person.
Right.
Getting to be a person, getting to be accepted in any genre, art form, but they're allowed to be themselves and just be and accepted, right, and be celebrated for being. And I think if I would tell a young singer to do anything, is the thing that makes big stars individual is how much they respect themselves and how much they admire themselves, and that they have real, they show that to everybody. Like, I have a lot of self-respect for myself, and that's how I treat you, and that's how you treat me. And if you keep that as a way that's a personal thing, it'll build to a great professional habit as well.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well, Daniel, I think that is about all the time that we have. I know you and I could talk for hours upon hours about various things, but we want to keep
happy hour soon, I hope.
Happy hour soon. Well, I mean, you think this is tea, but
somebody put a meme on Facebook that said, "Let's just make pandemic like Vegas. You drink whenever you want."
Is it not already supposed to be that way? I don't know. Well, before we go, I want to just give a few thank yous first to my very first guest, Daniel Mobbs. Daniel, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to see you and just hear what you have to say about queerness in opera. I also have to thank the people that support me, Dean Leroy Bynum and Director Bonnie Mitch at the Portland State University College of the Arts School of Music and Theater. Those two individuals have really made queer opera possible, and I thank them for their support. In addition to them, the PSU Foundation, who works very hard to make sure that we have what we need to keep going at queer opera. So Daniel, thank you again, and can't wait to give you a hug whenever that is in the future.
Virtual hugs.
Right. Virtual hug. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.